All right, amen. Thank you, Mike and team. That was excellent. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to worship together this morning. If you're new, my name is Neal, and I'm the campus pastor here at the Church of Hebron. Glad you're with us here on this chilly Sunday morning. Next week, I want to invite you to the conclusion of our Own Your Life teaching series. Tony Rose, who's a pastor locally here, is going to be with us. And he's going to be speaking on trauma. And so this is obviously a real issue, and some of you may be going through that at the present moment. So really want to encourage you to be here next week. If you know someone that's going through it, please make sure to invite them to be here in the room next week, 9:30, 11 o'clock, so that we can talk through this. What we're doing in this teaching series is trying to help you kind of get unstuck with different things in your lives so you can follow Jesus and pursue Jesus. And so trauma is a big deal, and that will be a good week next week, so I encourage you to be here. As far as today goes, I think about the hardest days of my early years, and I really didn't have a ton of hard days in my early years. I'll call that pre-20 years old, so just kind of get a sense of where that was. Some of you can appreciate those days that you might be living in those days. Others of you are like me, you're reflecting back on those days. And I remember that kind of the hardest days of those early years were the first days that I actually went to college. And so I went to college in Pensacola, Florida. I lived in northeastern Pennsylvania. It was 1,200 miles. And I had never been away from home other than to spend the night at a friend's house. Didn't go to camp, didn't believe in it, didn't like it, didn't know it was the thing. And no theological conviction, just didn't like it. And so I remember going down, my parents dropping me off at school. And I just remember that first weekend when I didn't know anybody at all. I had nothing to do. None of my friends were around, quote unquote. And I wasn't near anything. And it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. I called my mom. I cried on the phone. I said, "You have got to come get me. This is the worst." This was a bad decision. When you're in bad decisions, the best decision you can make is to get out of those bad decisions as quickly as possible. Like, I laid it out the argument. She's like, "No, that's not happening." And so a month down the road, the funny thing was I went from hating my life to a month down the road, I started to have friends. And I started to like being down there. There's all these people that were my age. That was not true in the thriving metropolis of Mahoopany, Pennsylvania. And so, and then by like winter break, I was deeply torn about whether I wanted to even come home or not. Right? And this may be like some of the things that you went through as well. But I asked myself, like, what is the difference? Why did I go from calling my mom and pleading with her to come pick me up to go, and I'm not sure I even want to see my parents again, well, how did that happen? Like, what was the difference? And the difference was friends. Friends play an important part in our lives. And the right friendships can really help us thrive in life. And so I want to have a conversation this morning about the topic of friendship, specifically the topic of community, because Jesus understood the value of community, and the scriptures actually teach us about this idea that we are created to live in community, and it's in community where we really pursue Jesus. And so we like to say at the Church of Hebron this way: we are created to grow together. Like that we want to help people grow together, and we need community. And so I want to talk about the importance of having strong community this morning. I'm going to tackle this subject with two questions and answers, and then I'm going to talk through sometimes some common objections to friendship and to community. And so let's start by asking this question this morning: why should I have friends? Why should you have friends? Why should we pursue friendships? Why should we pursue this community that God wants us to be in? Beyond the idea, well, God wants us to do that. Sure, that's true. But there's specific reasons why God asks us to do this, why he wants us to do that. So I want to walk through a couple of these this morning. We're going to be in different texts this morning. It's a little bit unusual. Instead of going right through a specific text, we're going to be kind of looking at a couple different texts. The first of those is in Proverbs chapter 18. And I want you to see, first of all, that one of the good reasons why we should actually pursue friendships and have friends is that friends support us. Friends support us. Or the type of friendships that God wants us to have in our lives, those types of friendships support us. Proverbs chapter 18, verse 24. Just a little bit of background here, because we're going to go back to Proverbs in a second. The book of Proverbs is like a collection of wisdom sayings. You can't tackle the book of Proverbs like going verse by verse through it like you can the rest of the books of the Bible, because it's just a collection of sayings. And so if you really wanted to study the book of Proverbs in depth, what you would do is you would take a topic and then read all 31 Proverbs and then connect all those the verses that talk about that topic. That would be the way that you would do that. And so it's much more topical. Proverbs 18, verse 24 talks about friendships. And it says this: one who has unreliable friends soon comes to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. And so this verse teaches a bunch of different things. In fact, that I actually would argue as well that there's a little bit of Jesus in this, in that second phrase, that pointing forward to the idea that Jesus as the true wisdom and as that friend who sticks closer than a brother. But in the immediate context, this passage is teaching us about the importance of friendships and about the right friendships actually supporting us and pushing us to pursue Jesus. And we need that support in our journey. A friend, fundamentally, is one who will support us as we pursue Jesus. Now, the text here actually starts by saying, hey, like, you can have friends and you can have friendships which will not support you, which actually produce this kind of this unreliable relationship. Friends who will leave you to face the trouble that you are in when you are in trouble. And so the author of this proverb says that's not the type of friendships that you should pursue. That's not the type of friendships you want. You want friends who are genuine friends, friends who do not abandon you when you are in trouble, and friends that will support you. Because we go through things in our lives where we will need the support of other people. And so the proverb here is calling us to really develop these types of friendships where we can then be supported. And this is why you need them, so that when you are in trouble, that they will be there for you. In fact, let me just go one step further. Friends are God's grace to you when you need his grace for your life. That's how important friends can be. We sometimes look at this and go, well, that person's helping me. That's not God. But no, God actually helps sometimes through the very friends that you have. That's his way of supporting you and sustaining you. So this first thing from Proverbs 18 is that friends support you. There's a second piece to this. Friends also connect you. And we need to be connected. Friends connect you. Galatians chapter 6, verse 2, Paul's writing to the church of Galatia. This is the last chapter in this book. And he says, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. Again, it's very important for you to understand this, that the Bible envisions our lives. It sees our lives as happening, as taking place in a community that is pursuing Jesus. And so what happens is part of our responsibility in that specific community is to help each other when we are walking through tougher times. Friends are the way for us to be able to unleash the gifts that God has given to us, to be able to use them to further the gospel and to encourage others. We need friends. We need community to make this happen. If it's just you and God, your gifts and talents and abilities won't be used to further the gospel because it's just you and God. And so friends connect us with this community that God wants us to be a part of. We are connected to serve, and we are also connected to be served, and both of these are really important. Now, the third reason why we should pursue friendships, why we should have friends, is that friends will challenge you. And this might be the point of the program where you're like, oh, I think that's going to go under the negative column, but it shouldn't. That's not negative. It's actually important and helpful. Proverbs 27, verse 6, wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. You probably know this, but we all probably need to be reminded of this. We don't always make good choices for our lives. This is something that starts when we're very young in the kids' junior age bracket, and it continues on all the way through the entirety of our lives, all the way through adulthood. And so in the moments when we do dumb and with a professional skill level, we need friends who will challenge us and friends who will speak truth into our lives. Without these friends, we are prone to continue down wrong paths, that we will take decisions and compound them and make them worse. And so wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. And the final reason why I think that we should pursue friends comes from Matthew 22, verse 36 to 39. Friends give us opportunities to follow Jesus. And I've been talking about how friends connect us with pursuing Jesus, but friends give us opportunities to follow Jesus. Listen to what Jesus says about the greatest commandment. Starting in verse 36, somebody asked Jesus, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" And Jesus replies, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself." And so we ask ourselves, how do we live for Jesus with our lives? Well, one, the text says that we love the Lord our God with all our hearts and souls and minds. But right after that, Jesus says, and right attached to that, Jesus says, we love our neighbor as ourselves. This is more proof, again, that you need a community to love. You need a community to follow Jesus. You cannot say that it's simply me and Jesus and I will live a successful Christian life with just me and Jesus, because when Jesus comes to distill the law and says these are the important things, he says you got to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and you have to love your neighbor, and those two go together. So you need God, yes, but you also need a community of people, absolutely, as well. And so why should we have friendships? Why should we pursue friendships? These are some good reasons to do that. Now, some of you here this morning are probably convinced that you need friendships, okay? And that's good. I hope that you're there. I hope that the text at least challenges you that you should need these friendships. But I think that where we sometimes get stuck is how do we develop friendships? Some people feel like they're natural at this, and other people are they're the opposite of natural, right? And so how do we develop friendships? I actually think some of the same verses give us some insight into how to do this. And so I want to give you 3 suggestions from the text as well. We'll go right back to Matthew 22, 36 to 39, that verse 39. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. I want to focus on the word neighbor for a second here. And Jesus uses the word neighbor here. He doesn't use the word stranger, but neighbor. Neighbors are people that have some type of connection with you. And so what I think we need to understand here is that how do we develop friendships? We develop friendships by loving the people that God puts in front of you. And neighbors are among them. These are the people that have some type of connection with you. In the text during this time, it would have been general physical proximity. But the point here is that God does put people in our past, that God does put people in our circles of influence. And we don't actually pick and choose our neighbors. You're like, yeah, Neal, I know that because I would choose some different neighbors this morning if I had them. But God puts people in our paths. God puts people in our communities. And so we don't get to choose those people, but we get to choose what we do in response to that. We get to choose to love the people that God puts in front of you. And maybe this doesn't matter for you, but I'm going to chase a little rabbit trail here for a second. Sometimes we are so obsessed with picking and choosing the people that are in our community that we miss out on the real blessing of the people that God has actually chosen to be a part of our community. And so we I know that we like to be with certain people, but sometimes the people that God puts on our path end up being the greater joy, the greater blessing that we would have never thought to put in our community. And actually, those people being in our community are the true blessings of our lives, along with the people that we like too. But the point is that God chooses to put people there. And so our way of developing friendships is simply love the people that God puts in our path. We don't have to overthink this because God is in control and he does what is best. Here's the second thing that I think would be helpful as we try to develop friendships. Welcome people into your life. Now I'm going to go back to Galatians 6, verse 2 again. It says, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. To carry a burden or to help carry a burden means that there's at least two people involved, and one person is coming alongside the other person. And so in order for you to help me in my life, I actually have to welcome you into my life. Does that make sense? You can't help me if I'm not willing to receive your help. Now, we as Christians are generally speaking, I think our culture is really good at helping people. Like, we're really interested in helping and coming alongside people. We really struggle with receiving the help, right? That's really where we get hung up. But you do realize that nobody else can really help unless somebody is willing to let them help. Now, it's interesting here in the specific text that he says, carry each other's burdens. The word burdens here is a fascinating word. Burdens aren't simply the everyday things of life. That's actually, if you look in Galatians chapter 6, verse 5, so you go down 3 other verses, and you'll notice that the word load is used there. It says, for each one should carry their own load. The word load there is really basically the normal everyday responsibilities of life that we all carry. And so Paul says, that each of us should carry those things. But he said there's also burdens in life. And burdens are things that are well beyond the daily responsibilities. These are really difficult situations. And that where those exist, we need other people to come alongside us and to help us and to help carry those burdens, those burdens that we can't carry on our own. I heard one pastor explain it this way, and I think this is probably a pretty good way to explain it. The load is like a brown paper bag with your lunch in it, right? So I don't even know if we did that. Does anybody do that anymore? Is that a thing? Okay, so like at one point in time, back in my day, we would pack a lunch at school and there was a brown paper bag. And okay, I was trying to make sure. I assume the 9:30 crowd feels me at this point. The 11 o'clock crowd may not get this, but all to say, like, you carry that around. That's not heavy. That's not a big deal. I don't need somebody else's help. Even if your mom or dad packed you a really good lunch, it's still not that heavy. So you can still carry it on your own. It's not a big deal. So that's like the word load in Galatians chapter 6, verse 5. In Galatians chapter 6, verse 2, the word burden is more like a piano, right? And with the exception of Jason Ellis, nobody in this room can carry that. You need to tell him that. No one else is carrying around a piano on their own. Like, if you're going to move a piano, you need a bunch of people to help you move that piano. That is like life sometimes throws pianos your way. And when life throws pianos your way, you need the help of other people. But you have to welcome people into your life in order for them to be able to help you. And so if you're struggling with friendships this morning, if you're struggling with it, you have to know that there's going to be places and opportunities for you to welcome people into your life, to help you with the pianos that come your way. And if we refuse to let people help us, we are not welcoming them into our lives. We're actually really rejecting God's community. That might be a better thing for some of us to grapple with this morning. To not welcome people into our lives in the moments where we actually need them is to reject God's community for us. All right, there's a third thing that I think is important, and this is more nuanced, but we also need to be inviting people into deeper relationships with us. Back to Proverbs chapter 27, verse 6 again. Wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. None of us here in the room are fully self-aware. And none of us are fully objective about the choices that we make and how we live our lives. And so other people at times speaking into our lives are very much necessary. But it's not just any other person. It's a person who is totally for us, who is on our side and wants what's best for us and knows us well enough to be able to discern the difference. And that type of person is the exact type of person Proverbs describes as being helpful and needed in our lives. But how do we get that type of person? Like, how do How do we advance a friendship from kind of a superficial level to get it to further down the line to where they are this type of a person? And it typically comes through building of a relationship where we invite people in and where there are times of growth and connection, to where we get to a point where we are able to open up ourselves to that person and be more vulnerable at the same time that person does the same thing with us. And ultimately, this leads to a friendship from whom we can hear words that we need to hear when we really need to hear them. They're wounds, as the Proverbs says, which are really words we may or may not want to hear, but are truth that are trusted words. Those words we need to hear come from these types of friendships. And it's interesting, in the text, when we see the fruit of this relationship, the fruit of inviting somebody into a deeper relationship, the text actually says that the enemy multiplies kisses, which is another way maybe to say that the enemy just kind of tells you what you want to hear. In our culture today, telling people what they want to hear is like the accepted thing. That's what you do. And that's how you show that you're a friend. But Proverbs says that's the exact opposite of a friend. And that an enemy does that. And that the faithfulness of a friend is a person willing to speak truth into your life when they love you and care for you. So you have to invite people into that. And when I say it's a nuanced type of a thing, there's not like a 5-step process. Like you can't just like work this. Friendships don't work that way. Relationships don't work in that way. You have to. It's a connecting with a person with coffee and thinking, oh, there might be something here a little bit further that might be helpful for me, or being in a small group with them and interacting with them, talking with them before and afterwards, or it's maybe like hanging out with them as you're picking up the kids later today and like getting a sense of like, hey, this may be something that may be able to go deeper. But you do actually have to pursue that. Like you have to think through that. You have to be willing at some point as well to open yourselves up to a relationship, so that it could go deeper, so that it could potentially be this type of relationship. Now, before I end things this morning, I do want to have a conversation about some common objections to friendships, because I think that some of you are all bought in on the first two things, but there's a couple objections that you're trying to work through in your mind, and so let me try to address these as best I can. The first objection is this: friendships can be messy. So we don't want any part of them, right? Friendships are messy. I don't want any part of them. I don't like a messy thing. Well, friendships are messy, that's true, because people are messy and you are messy as well. So, like if you avoid friendships, you still have a mess. It's just your own mess. The idea that you are better off alone or better off in a small circle of friends as opposed to having a good group of friends may not be as valid a thought as you think it is. And so I want to politely challenge you a little bit with that. Sure, like if you didn't have any friends, you'd have less of a mess. But does that make your life better? And I would argue that it does not. Messy is better than clean with no one around. And so I encourage you to lean into that, if that's your excuse, if that's your objection this morning. Second objection: friendships take too much time. And we are a busy culture, and we don't want to take the time to make friends, because if we aren't working, we want to be resting or playing or doing stuff, and we don't want to take the time. And friendships can feel more like work, particularly for some of us. Friendships really do feel like work, and we don't want to devote that needed time to make that happen. And so the assumption here, again, is that the effort to make friends isn't worth the time. But my question is that really true? Is that really true? Sometimes the things that we put the most effort in end up being worth the most. So I encourage you to push through that. And maybe you need to be less busy. Maybe you just need to say no to some things so you can say yes to some friendships. Third thing: friendships have burned you in the past. Now, as I say this one probably feels very personal, and you maybe have specific friendships in mind that you're walking through. And so, like, if this is your objection, you believe in the value of friendships and community, but you struggle kind of to dip your feet back into the waters because you feel you've been burned by previous friendships. And so I would say, like, I'm sorry if this is you and you're going through this and you feel like you've been extremely burned by a friendship. But there's a couple things that you probably need to talk yourself through here. One is that past situations should not dictate future relationships. Like the most dangerous thing about a burned friendship actually isn't the burned friendship. It's the fact that you wouldn't pursue others as a result of the burned friendship. Because that just makes it worse. And so don't allow past situations to dictate future relationships. They may inform those relationships, but they should never dictate them. And then this final one, it's funny. Sometimes there's a sense in which sometimes I do crowdsourcing. Do you know what crowdsourcing is? Like you just ask a bunch of people randomly, like, "Hey, what are your thoughts on this?" To get insight. Sometimes I don't own the market of truth on some of those objections. And so I was at a coffee shop this week, and there was a bunch of people there, and I just walked up to them and said, "Hey, what are your objections about friendship?" And they're all high school students and college students. And so I was like, they're probably not going to tell me anything. And immediately, each one of them, literally, right immediately, started talking to me about this. And it was this last one. The idea that friendships can be rejected. That the fear of rejection is what keeps people from actually putting themselves out there. And I understand that. I can appreciate that. When you open yourself up to someone to try to establish a friendship, there's somebody that you might be able to think to yourself, man, I think maybe this could go deeper. We could have a potentially better friendship. You open yourself up, and what happens if they're like, yeah, no, that's not happening? And you feel that rejection. And so there's a fear beforehand of the fear of being rejected as you're trying to make connections and friendships. But this fear of rejection, again, it comes back to that actually prevents us from developing the types of friendships that God uses. You're fearing that when you open yourself up to someone that they may reject you, so as a result of that, you don't open yourself up. But that person that you think might potentially reject you might do the exact opposite and might be the person that God uses in amazing ways in your life, and all you have to do is open yourself up. But you won't because you're fearing that rejection that's involved. Is it possible that that person will reject you? Sure. And there may be a myriad of reasons for that might have nothing to do with you. It might just be where that person is in their lives. But what if that turns into a massively helpful friendship, a deep connection that helps you grow and pursue Jesus? What happens if that's the case? I guess what I'm saying is that if all we do is live our lives in fear of rejection, we're missing out on the potential blessings that God has for us with the joy of acceptance. And so we have to be able to kind of walk ourselves through that. The bigger issue here is that community is necessary for us. And so we need friends. Friends help us get unstuck. Friends help us own our lives. Friends help us grow spiritually. And yeah, there's going to be some pain and there's going to be some frustrations, but the pain of not having community will always be greater. And Jesus didn't die so you could be a Christian and live in isolation. He died so you could live in a community of believers who are forgiven and seeking Him. This is what really brings Him glory. This is really what brings Him joy. So let me suggest to you a couple of things as we finish up this morning by way of application. First of all, if you say, you know what, Neal, as I think this through, I've got some really close friends and they're able to speak truth into my life. They've said things to me in different ways and we have good connection. We have good friendships. I feel like this is an area where the Lord is blessed and where things are doing well. Then I would say, that's awesome. Keep going. All right? Be thankful to the Lord for what you have. Be thankful to your friend. Maybe send a note to your friend later today and say, the Lord has used you in my life in such a great way. Thank you. And just do that. That'll mean a lot to that friend. It'll be an encouragement. A great way to thank the Lord for what he's done. Maybe you would say, you know what, I've had friendships like that in the past, but I haven't necessarily, I've kind of let those lag a little bit. It's been a few months since I've connected with those individuals. And so maybe what you need to do today is you need to, phone a friend. You need to call a friend. You need to text a friend. And you need to kind of just reestablish that connection. And just start back that which was so profitable for you for a while. And maybe you would say, you know what, Neal, I don't know that I have these types of friendships, but I would like them. And so I would encourage you to do simple things like love the people that are in front of you and seek to deepen friendships. But also remind yourself, this takes a little bit of time. All right, so this doesn't happen overnight. You can't be like, hey, I'm committed to getting some deep friends. Hopefully by Thursday this week, I'll be in good shape. All right, so it's not really the way that works. But you can set simple goals. The first thing I do is I would go home and I would pray. I say, Lord, could you reveal to me some people in life that I may want to try to connect with? And then if the Lord reveals some to you, then you just figure out time to have coffee with them in the next couple of weeks, or to connect with them for lunch, or maybe it's a couple that you're looking to get to know. So maybe it's a couple and a couple getting together and doing that, and to do those sorts of things, and just start to develop a friendship and see where it goes, and see what God might do with that. But my point would simply be, do not let yourself be alone. I'm going to say something to the guys in the room too, just because I want to do this. I think it's very important that you do this. Don't go, well, I have my wife, and so that's good enough. Okay, don't put that on her. All right, that is a burden that she does not need to carry in full. All right, she signed up for some of it, but not all that you're saying she signed up for. And so you need to try to connect with other guys. All right, you can do this through your interests and through different things, but try to connect with some people that you know that are maybe pursuing Jesus. The people in the room this morning, the people in the room in the second service are a good group of people to be thinking about trying to connect with. And there'll be a bunch of different ways to do that. So pursue friendships, because they matter. I still remember, by the way, back in 1992, it was August of 1992, calling my mom and saying, you got to come get me, all right? Because this whole college thing is no. I'm doing college closer to home. And she said no. And I remember December of 1992 and the joy that it was and the difference that happened, all because of friends. I am telling you that if you're feeling stuck in your life, the friends that you have can help you, or the friends that you will make could help you. God could use that as a means of grace to help you own your life.